Yeah. So I kind of asked you to try to that circle there.
Yeah.
That's where the camera.
Yeah. It's always really.
Presentations. Okay. Rule number 1 is have water. Okay, you got it. And rule number 2 is remember you have this. You got this. Okay. So let the transformation begin. Okay, please.
So I did make notes. The preparation process for this actually, I think, was more enlightening than I anticipated. Just thinking about it concertedly. Once there was a date on the calendar, I mean, it's not like I've never thought about this. I remember very early on watching Sensei Teresa's black belt presentation and being duly impressed, of course, at the organization and the flow and the variety that was included. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, never, right? But sitting here today with so much gratitude and so much love and so much goodwill radiating from all of you, there's so much. And the most difficult part of preparing really was picking out what to highlight. There's so much that could have been included, that I wanted to include, that I'm sure I've forgotten, that I thought about. But I've just selected a few things that I felt were most important at this point. The first time I ever heard the term, the word, the name, Aikido, was actually from a professor. And he was using it as an illustration. He was teaching us counseling techniques. And the way he was using it, he described flowing with a situation and redirecting it rather than getting in somebody's face and going, well, that's a dumb idea. And he was describing it in the counseling situation, but he kept talking about it, like over and over and over again. And the way he described it just sounded really, it sounded like something I could get into. It sounded like something I could do. As a young person, my brother was very into Karate Kid movies, and so of course we had to take karate for a little while. And that did not work for me. I was just not into punching people. I just was like, I'm sure you guys who know me can picture that. So the idea of the flowing motion of using something that's given to you and turning it into something else, I thought was so fascinating. And so I already had a good association with the word when I noticed the sign out on the road. And I was like, oh, Aikido, that's that thing that, Professor King was talking about, okay. And here's a confession I wasn't quite sure I was going to put into this, but Christy and I were watching this cartoon. Don't know if you've seen it. It's called Avatar, The Last Airbender. I was super into it. One of my clients I was working with at the job I was at the time, who was 11 years old, by the way, got me started on it. And so I got Christy started on it, and we were watching it going, oh, that's so cool, the martial arts and the way it was presented. And the movie was not so great, but the cartoon was good. So we started talking, Christy and I. We were roommates at the time, and we were like, hey, we should do something. We should do something active. And I'm like, well, there's this Aikido place. And we were just living around the corner on Ash Street. And so one Saturday morning, in our sweatpants and t-shirts, we showed up. And the rest is history, as that goes. But that's kind of the story of how I came to this. And came to it with a certain apprehension of not having had what I would consider a successful martial arts experience in the past, and not really feeling myself equal to the martial part of the art. Knowing that confrontation in any variety is something that I have never excelled at. However, feeling that it would be good for me to stretch myself in this area. And I'm so grateful to have found a safe place to do that. It's still an area where I know I need to grow, but 6.5 years later, I think I can safely say that I have made some strides. So, thank you, all of you, because you've all been very instrumental in that process. And I would not still be here if it weren't for all of you who have made this a place that is safe and fun and exciting and calming and secure in many ways. So, as a bit of a demonstration of what my professor was probably talking about, Christy, would you, not a dramatic example, of course, but when you're dealing with a confrontation, an attack, an uncomfortable situation, there is a way to try and stop it and say, no, you can't do that. So it's, whereas we get in that point into a balance of strength. Whose will, whose physical, whose, and luck at that point. And being a rather small person, Aikido's assumption that whoever's attacking you is probably stronger, and you just kind of assume that from the get-go. So you bias the interaction in your own favor as much as possible. And flowing with it rather than stopping it works out a lot better for me. So again, dramatic example, but that's kind of the concept. And that is the attraction, of course, to a smaller, less confrontational sort of person. I've also found Aikido's tradition and roots very intriguing. The legacy, I think, of where it built from and where it's come from, and the years of refinement, I think, that have gone into these time-honored motions, where that interaction was, well, Christy had a knife, but it was developed from years of martial experience, sword work, as the examples are always very helpful when you're like, oh, okay, I see where that came from. And so you're working with the physics and the mechanics that people have understood about the way the human body moves for centuries, literally. And that's something that I've always found very intriguing about Aikido as an art. You can't help but respect the samurai. I mean, they're pretty awesome. They might not have always had the best idea about how to do things, but they knew what they were doing. And they cared about their craft, for lack of a better word. So I've always enjoyed that, the roots of the art. It is unique among my experience of martial arts, however, that variety and difference of body type and motion is not only allowed but celebrated. That's something that I kind of kept expecting, kind of off on the side of my my thinking process is, okay, there's gonna come a point where I just can't do this anymore because I'm not strong enough or whatever enough. That there's something about me that's just not gonna, I'm gonna get to a certain place with this where I'm just not gonna be able to do it anymore. I haven't quite found that yet. And so those nagging doubts kind of in the back of my mind that I think were just left over from my recovering perfectionism had a little difficulty with some of the techniques, especially at first. But very much appreciated the constant encouragement and feedback that I would get from working with different people. Throwing my gut is completely different than throwing Aaron. It just is. And me throwing my gut is completely different than Kathy throwing my gut. We do it differently. But that's okay, and that's good. And that's really something that I very much value about Aikido and this dojo in particular. I don't know about all Aikido. I don't really care about all Aikido. I care about you. You know, and this is a place that I feel that I'm okay to be me. And you don't find that in a lot of places in the world. You really don't. So, that's another thing I really love about this. So that's something I wanted to... going back to my recovering perfectionist tendencies, the lack of the kata form, I actually really liked that about karate, is that I could have a prescribed series of motions that I could memorize and perfect, and so I actually did pretty well with that. So not having that is a blessing and a frustration all at the same time for my personality. You quote O-sensei rather frequently where he said Aikido has no form and no style, so you can never tell if you're doing it right. Although, if the other person falls down and you don't, that's kind of a good sign. As when Teresa does it. It always looks awesome when Teresa does it. And I remember thinking that in those words to myself. I might have actually said it out loud at some point. And that goes with the falling down part, too. Like, there's a certain way, we call it ukeme, the falling down, where you can do it without hurting yourself. But everybody does it a little bit differently. And you can observe, and you can borrow, and you can learn, and you can change, but the uniqueness of working with your own body and working with the person that you're interacting with is very cool. It's just, the complexity of it is endless. So there's always a new challenge, and there's always a new technique that you swear you've never seen before. You've been doing this for how long, and he comes up with something new. But, and so that progression of thought process of being able to sit with the ambiguity and be okay with it, I think has been an incredibly calming process for my mental health, for lack of a better word. Aikido has definitely found its way into other areas of my life, especially work, relationships, but the enter, circulate, resolve philosophy has found its way popping up in things I really didn't want to take care of. But you know what? It's not going away if I don't deal with it, so I'm gonna do it. I don't feel prepared. I don't feel like I have all the information I need, but I'm gonna have this conversation because if I keep putting it off, it's just gonna drive me crazy. And I feel like that has also had a very good effect on my mental health. Something that we learn physically on the mat really translates beautifully into the world, everywhere. And I didn't anticipate that. Walking in on that first day, I was thinking to myself, oh, this could be, this is gonna be cool, this is gonna be good for me. I know I need to be more active. The whole couch potato thing wasn't working for me. So, but I had never anticipated the depth of strength that I would find here. that I would draw on, that I would tap into, and that would find an answering echo in my own soul. I did not anticipate that, but I am so grateful for it. And anyway, I'm getting off my notes. I first noticed Aikido making a difference in my daily life when I started making eye contact with people I walked by on the street. At the time, I was working downtown, and when I would close up the plant shop where I was working in downtown San Luis, sometimes it would be dark outside, and I would have to walk to my car. And downtown San Luis, right across the street from the Mission, it's, well lit, well trafficked. I didn't really think about it all that much until I started thinking about it. But instead of being afraid of it, I put my head up, I put my shoulders back, and I started making eye contact with people. And then I wasn't afraid anymore. And I met some cool people. And we live downtown now. And I had a really great conversation with a homeless man on the way home from work the other day. And just having that interaction is something I never would have done 7 years ago. Wouldn't have even crossed my mind. Just pretend they're not there, just walk by and just, wouldn't have even crossed my mind to return his greeting when he said good evening, And that's all it was. It was 3 sentences back and forth. But just acknowledging that he was a person, and that I saw him, that he wasn't in my space, But it gave me the confidence to say good evening and go along my way. And that might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but it's a big deal to me. And it's just changed the way I think about things in a good way. And I still have a long way to go. And I'm excited about that. I was very excited when I found out that the translation of the first black belt is first step. It made me feel a whole lot better because I do not feel like I'm black belt material sometimes. Like, there are some times I am just, for whatever reason, not getting this. Something just doesn't catch, or my brain is just elsewhere, or I, didn't eat breakfast, or whatever. And I'm just like so frustrated because I have this unrealistic expectation of perfection. And that just keeps, acknowledge that it's there, let it go, it's fine, be kind to yourself is very, very difficult sometimes. And just asking the questions, engaging with, okay, what's going on here, allowing for the complexity and learning and growing and doing it better next time. And having the space to do that is very freeing and very calming. In preparing for this, I had a difficult time putting things in perspective. I found myself judging where I'm at right now from the perspective of where I want to be. So I'm not looking at my skill level today in the context of where I was 7 years ago, which is a completely different perspective, if that makes sense. Did I say that right? So looking at the little mistakes that I make today is completely different than when I was a white belt and I was afraid to fall down. So thinking about, yes, I have come a ways. I have. And that's something that is good. And I can be excited about that, and I can be proud of it, and I can accept that this is where I am in the process. Like Kathy always reminds me, trust the process, which I very much appreciate. So yeah, it's a good process. There are times when it's incredibly uncomfortable, and there are times when it's dreadfully frustrating. But we come back and we work on it again. And we grow, and we learn, and we laugh, and we do life together. There were people I would never for the impact that you've had on me. Little things. I could go around the room and embarrass you all, I'm quite certain. I won't, but looking at each and every one of you, I'm very grateful for the input that you've had in helping me get to this place, personally and on that. So that includes everyone else too. So getting off the couch and getting onto the mat was a big step. And it's also leaked into other areas where I've decided I want to be more active and I want to be more able to, we started running because we figured, after you throw somebody, you kind of want to get away, right? It's changed the way I think about wearing shoes when I go to a strange place. I don't wear high heels the first time I go someplace anymore. Because you never know. Now, I figure I'm going to wear high heels to church, I'm not going by myself, or, I figure I'm going to be okay, but I do have other shoes in my car. You just think about things a little bit differently. I think that's valuable. I think it's a really good thing. So there's so much. I could keep going. I think I've got all my catchphrases that I wanted to make sure I included that have really leaked into the way I think about things. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but you find yourself in another situation outside of the dojo and hear Sensei's voice in my head go, be kind to yourself. Okay. Or hear Kathy's voice in my head, trust the process. It's good. It's really good. I picked out a few things that I wanted to highlight from each of the curriculum techniques as they came along. Just big ideas that stuck with me the first time I was learning that technique. And as we progress through the promotion techniques in Aikido, we focus very specifically on one technique for each belt, as it were. And so the first time through the curriculum is totally different than going back through later on. And I might get to that at some point. But basics first. I'm going to ask Christy to come and help me. We're going to talk a little bit about Sumitoshi. After I get a drink of water. Sorry, you can hold that for sure. Thank you. I'm actually going to put this here so I don't have to. So, back to that first day, we walked in our sweatpants and our t-shirts, and we learned Sumitoshi. Starting at the beginning is a good place to start. And this is going to get ink on my knee. If I put it back there, because I'm sweating. So, first thing I learned is it's okay to fall down. And that's my big idea for Sumitoshi. When I first walked onto the mat, off of the couch onto the mat, I'm looking at the ground going, that is a very far ways away. Because falling down is not something that we as grown-ups typically like to do. I mean, I do it, but I don't really mean to most of the time. And there's typically there's discomfort with that. But anyway, so I learned that the mat is a wonderful thing. So I'm very grateful for that. And performing the technique itself is only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is falling down. And I wasn't that good at it the first time. But you get better at it. You learn not to hit your head on the ground. You learn to, it's okay. It's okay. And it took me, I don't think I was really good at falling down until I was like second blue belt or something like that. This is a confession. But Sumitoshi is also very different, even with the same attack, if you're having a push or a pull. So when Christy first demonstrated, she not only grabbed my arm, but she was pushing on me, like she was coming into my space. And so my choice with that attack was to turn and say, okay, you're coming this direction, I'll help you. You know, that's fine. A different attack is a pull, which you can still do Sumitoshi, but you're helping them do what they're already doing. Like, I'm not going to try and drag her anywhere she doesn't want to go. I don't need to. Let her do the work. So, thank you. So that's my big idea for Sumitoshi, is it's okay to fall down. So it took me a while to decide that was true, but I did learn that from Sumitoshi. I probably learned it actually the second time through. But my next big idea for Aikido is I figured out that falling down, how do I want to phrase this? I don't necessarily want to phrase it the way I wrote it down. Because the term I wrote down is resistance is pain. And when you're not quite sure what to do, that's a little bit different than when you're actually trying to be kind of gnarly. So for Aikido especially, Christy, can I borrow you again? We were going to do this two ways. Which one do we decide first? Okay, yeah, thank you. That fall is a little bit different than the other. And so if Christy tries to resist me when I do this technique, like she's just going to plant her feet and she's just not going to go. She's just not going to go. I could make that happen, but it's going to hurt her to do that. So finding the way that's not hitting the resistance is the charm, where you can feel that, oh, I can make that happen, maybe I might be strong enough because she's in a bad spot and I've got my core strength right here, so I could drive through that and have her face plant on the ground, but I didn't need to. So it's kind of nice to have the option. Were we going to do anything else with Aikido?
Did you want to do that?
Oh yeah. The turn versus, okay. Tenchi and Arimi. You guys on the mat mostly know what I'm talking about when I use those terms. When she comes with that first Aikido that she did, she's coming into my space, and so I'm giving it to her and choosing a different space for myself. So I'm turning and letting her go by, which is a different choice that I make instead of if she's coming into my space and I enter hers. So turning versus entering has also been an interesting concept that I very much enjoyed. And I don't know if I articulated it as clearly as I hoped to, but I think you get the point. And it is a recurring thing. So thank you. So let's Aikido. Kodagaishi. May I borrow you since Teresa? Give Christy a break. We're going to do Kodagaishi is a technique that I learned to move forward. So, actually very much remember you explaining this to me. We were working on Kodagaishi, and we got to that part with the turn, I was totally backing up. And Sensei Maureen did this thing with her finger where she just, and I've seen you do it too, but for whatever reason it clicked when you explained it to me. When you're doing the turning, you're choosing to make the turn to go forward yourself. You're not letting them dictate where the turn is going. It's a very subtle difference, and I don't know if I can really explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it, but that was my big idea for Kodagaishi, is moving forward and how subtle that difference can feel. Oh, gosh, that was a rough one. I still mess that one up sometimes, but I can feel the difference now. So does that make sense? Okay. So that's my big idea for Kodagaishi. Kodagaishi is also what I did earlier with the knife takeaway. Is my favorite knife takeaway. The pin is really, with the holding the arm thing there too, that was good. Irimi Nage is the next one, and Tenshi Nage goes along with it. And this one, this is the point when I got to this place in the training where I was so sure I was going to wash out at this point. I was like, entering, I can't enter, I can't do it. I'm going to freak it, and it freaked me out because it's getting up in somebody else's personal space. Cynthia Teresa. So, just from the concept of not waiting for her to come to me, I'm going to go to her, and I'm going to get in her personal space. And that was just so weird. I barely know you. I mean, I know you now, but at the time, I was like, I especially with, I don't know how I can really say it. How do you say it out loud, you know? When you're, oh, that's kind of okay. Keep doing that. So, let's do this again, because I did that side, right? So, entering isn't being mean is my big idea for Riminage. Although with Tenshi, sometimes it can look kind of mean, especially when they're doing the entering one. So yeah, that's my big idea for Riminage. I'm not going to belabor it necessarily, but entering isn't mean, although it felt mean, and I still have a hard time with it sometimes. But I was so convinced the Riminage was going to be the end of me. And then after I did my Riminage promotion, that was all I could do in Ronduri for like months. I was just doing Riminage all the time. So for whatever reason, it seems to go in cycles like that, where you get a technique and you just keep doing that one over and over and over again. And I never thought that it would be a Riminage, but I actually really like it now. So sticking with some of those tougher techniques can be really frustrating, but it's totally worth it in my experience, especially the ones you think, I'm never going to get this. And then you do, and it works for whatever reason. So trust the process, right, Kimberly? At the Nikkyo Sankyo Yonkyo level, personally I feel like that's where I learned more about ukeme than, I mean, I learned the techniques, I can do them, but I think that was the point in my training where I felt a little more confident with the falling down piece. Because for the longest time, it wasn't an incredibly fantastic uke, where Christy Kinabari, I can't explain this without showing it, just doing a Simi-toshi with a, from here, that doesn't work so good if I don't actually give her my center. So if I'm not actually punching, it doesn't work as good. But if I trust her and trust my own skill to fall down, and I can actually give her a decent attack, her technique is much improved. And that's something that took a while for me to really grasp. And it wasn't until, that was when Peter did his black belt. And like 5 seconds before he did his presentation, he comes up to me and he's like, hey, would you be my uke today? I'm like, sure. Okay. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Just go with it. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Because bless his heart, I miss Peter. I really do. And it was fine. because it's possible as uke to actually mess somebody up. It is possible. And I try very hard not to do that as much as I can. But especially in the beginning when I was first figuring out the whole falling down thing, as I said, it freaked me out. And I didn't always do it very well. So, Nikyo, Sankyo, Myorokyo. Do you remember the attacks we decided for that? Would you help me? Yeah. I'm not remembering. So, Nikyo. That is a Nikyo. And that's the other thing about Aikido that I couldn't decide how much I wanted to show. There's at least 8 different ways to do everything. Sure. Because that's also a Nikyo. It's the wrist, the way the wrist is bent. So, Nikyo. Oh yeah, that one. No, that's also a Nikyo. So that's Nikyo. And then Sankyo. So that's a Sankyo. And Yankyo is, which one did you put? Oh, that's a Nikyo. This one. That's Sankyo. Or not Yankyo. Again, I'm all confused. Maybe another drink of water. Excuse me. I'm getting all excited. Are there any questions? I mean, am I? Okay, everybody's smiling, so that's good. I had this horrible dream last night that I'd forgotten some very important things and I wasn't explaining anything clearly. You know, it's just one of those dreams. So, as long as I'm still seeing smiles, I think we're okay. So we did Nikyo, Sankyo, Yankyo. Next, okay. Personal favorites, gonna confess. Kaisen and Kokyu. These techniques are techniques that I was kind of drawn to from the beginning. They fit pretty well with the way I like to move, just kind of the way my body works. So, if I could borrow both Christy and Sensei Teresa, I think that'll work better with this. So, just the basics of Kokinage. Make sure it's actually do and Kaitanage. So, the difference is, you guys can see the difference. It's subtle, but it's there. But the really awesome thing about it is you can just kind of keep going. So, just oops, sorry. And the connection, sorry. Just wanted to point that out. I completely lost my grip on Teresa just there, but she kept her hand on next to mine, even if like we got our hands all messed up. But she stayed with me, and she followed me where I was going with the technique, which is the other side. Aikido is self-defense, yes, but it's also co-creative action, and that's the part that I really love. The part where we're both participating, all 3 of us in this case, and working on some very real body positioning stuff that is helpful in a self-defense situation, but we're also creating something beautiful. And I get excited about that, so. You want to do one more? Sure. I love that one. It's just too much fun, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit down for a minute. But yeah, you can just go with that one, and it's just a lot of fun. And having the other people actively engaged and participating with it just makes it so much more fun. So, once I've got my breath back, the last two techniques, Shihonage and Sayonage, my big idea was barely missing and angles, which this also goes back to Ariminage, where when you're passing the person by, my first tendency was to miss them by a wide margin, because you don't want to accidentally hit them. I don't know if we've all had this experience, but I know I've had this experience. Going through a door jam that you don't quite clear with your shoulder, you go, ugh! You're like, ah, okay. But with a lot of these techniques, you don't need to miss them by a mile. You just need to barely slip off, because that is what helps you retain your own balance, your own strength, your own plan, as it were, to be able to react in time to be effective. You up for this? She go first. So, I'm close to her, but I'm not, because my initial, I want to be out here, I want to be away from her, she wants to hurt me, why would I want to get close to her? But I gotta stay close to her to be able to pull this off. A, without hurting her elbow, and B, with having enough strength to be able to move quickly and accurately. So, Sayo, you especially don't want to get too far away on that one, because it just doesn't work. And that was just my big idea. There's 1,000 subtleties that I'm totally leaving out that's not capturing all of this. These are just the big ideas that I pulled out from some of these techniques and what they meant to me at the time. Oh yeah, that one. The angle is, the subtlety is so small. Like the difference between being too far away and being close enough, it just takes time to figure it out. And it's different when I'm throwing Christy versus when I'm throwing Micah versus when I'm throwing Zach. It's just totally different. And that's the part that we'll always be learning. We'll always be adjusting to the new situations as they come in, and the new people add richness to our technique and to our experience every single time. So, I think those were my big ideas from the curriculum. Did I miss anything? As far as I wrote it all down so that I wouldn't forget, because I knew if I tried to do this from memory, I would completely skip Kodagaishi or something. So I'm very excited, very honored, very grateful to take a first step.
Yeah, good job.